Thank you. There you go.
You have to figure out technology again. I can use this mic as well. So I don't have too many slides because I wanted to focus more on interaction with everybody in the room. Hopefully we can get into the Q&A soon as well. Yeah. One question. Is there a browser here? Is there Wi-Fi and internet here? Okay, so what I wanted to do was just share a refresher on supply chain overall. We're talking about, is this better? No. No, there's only one slide, so there's only one slide. So it's more a refresher about, we're talking about the inbound, outbound, first mile, middle mile, last mile. It can get confusing. Things are changing rapidly as well. So how our supply chain has morphed over the years. In this example, I'm using US, but it's pretty similar across the board. So if you look at what used to happen way back in the 70s, at least in the US, manufacturing was happening locally in the country. And you would have the manufacturers make the goods, you somehow bring it to the stores, and you wait for the customers to come buy it. And then what started happening was companies realized that there were too many of those lines back and forth, so it was inefficient to move from one factory to one store and back and forth. So hence came the whole concept of a hub and spoke. So what they started doing was they started creating the retail DCs. The idea was now you could get the goods from the suppliers, and one truck could go to multiple suppliers, you move it to the DC, you store it, cross-dock it, and you created that buffer so that you supply it to the stores only when needed. Right? And then what happened was we realized that it was a lot cheaper to produce the items in China and India and overseas. And hence, manufacturing went overseas. So now the suppliers were overseas, and you had to somehow, through ships, bring the items in the US, and then go to a hub, and do the import-export, and finally went to the DC. And so as you can see, it starts getting more complicated. So I know the manufacturing cost is, the main reason was cost is cheaper to manufacture in China, and that's why all this started happening. But it was still a push economy where the guys running all this were making predictions, forecast as to what kind of volume are we going to sell 6 months from now. Because now the manufacturing is happening 6 months in advance, and goods are coming in, and if your guess goes wrong, guess what happens? Either you're going to go out of stock, people want to buy, but you don't have enough shirts, or you have too much of something, overstock. If you go out of stock, your revenue gets impacted because there are customers who are willing to spend, but you don't have the item to sell. On the other hand, if you have too much, you already spent the capital, and you're not getting the returns on that as well. So either way, financially, there's an impact if your forecast is not accurate enough. If you're buying too much or buying too little, that's a problem. Moving on, e-commerce started to happen, right? And that changed everything. Because till now, I was forecasting what I want to put in store in Chicago versus New York and so on. Now I have no idea. Because the customer is going to get online. I don't even control at what time, because earlier I had my store hours. I knew that at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I'm going to close the store. Now there is no hours. It's 24/7. And customers can get online, and they can decide what they want. They can decide when they want it, how fast they want it, all the way down to, we talked about earlier today, to 2 hours delivery. It's crazy. So the supply chain that used to be 6 months long, now it's 2 hours. It's crazy to think about it, right? Where the customer is in control, and it's only when the customer says, I want this dress at this time, deliver it, then now you got to figure out, okay, where's that dress? Where am I going to get it from? How do I get it from where it's sitting all the way to the customer? So the whole concept of the inbound supply chain, the first mile, middle mile, last mile goes out of the window. Everything is mess. And that's where and it's happening so fast, all the innovation, the technology that's applied has to support the speed at which the changes are happening. So guess what's happening now? Well, customers can buy at the stores, they can buy online, they can buy on the phone, and then the whole supply chain has to adapt to what the customer is doing. So the old ways of thinking is not going to work anymore. It's pretty clear. Right? And hence the whole concept of let's load up the truck, fill up the truck, because in any transportation, when you're moving anything from point A to point B, your largest cost is always the driver and the truck. You're paying lease on it, and you're putting the fuel on it. So those two combined are your major cost. So in a truck, if you have 1,000 boxes, your cost per box goes down. But in that truck, same truck, if you have only 100 boxes, your cost goes up. Pretty natural. And that's the reason last mile is the most expensive mile. Because you cannot drive a 53-foot line haul into a neighborhood. It's not possible. So hence you drive those smaller trucks, which means only so many boxes. And last mile is the most complex piece to solve now, because it's the most important piece to solve. Why? Because the customers are not coming to the stores in that case. You go into their homes. So all the discussions about how do we solve the supply chain, it's a very different paradigm. So where we started is what's called a push supply chain, where the product was getting pushed by the companies down to the stores, and you wait for the customers. What's happening now is more a pull from the customer. And new designs are absolutely essential to do that. The other piece is, if you think about the total cost, yes, there are costs of rent that you're paying for the building and some capital that you have to spend in automating in some places. But when you look at the ongoing cost, there are only three major things to think about. One is labor cost. Second one is transportation cost. Transportation cost also has labor cost because of the drivers involved. And the third piece is really cost towards inventory, which can be capital for some businesses or can be operating cost for other businesses. So it's at the end, what you're managing is those three costs: the labor, transportation, and the item that you're buying, the cost of goods sold, COGS that you're driving. Balancing that with customer experience. Because if the customer wants it fast, it's going to cost more. And if the customer wants flexibility, where I asked that please deliver this box to my home, but I'm stuck at work, can you last minute make a change and deliver to my office? That's where we headed, that level of flexibility. But it comes at a cost. So as we have the discussion today and think about all the supply chain changes that are happening, I'd encourage us to think about those three cost pieces. As we're making those changes, the service is getting better, but is our labor cost, transportation cost, and the cost of buying the goods or manufacturing the goods, how does that equation change? Keeping that in mind, we can move forward and start designing the supply chains of the future. So a quick summary of the history and where we are right now, and hopefully it'll help with the discussion today. Well, handing back to you.